You said that we can't have 9 or 10 billion people on this planet without an impact on the environment. I think the critical challenge that many people are concerned about is the development model that the Chinese and the Indians will adopt. Do you think there's a prospect that they might adopt a more environmentally sustainable development model?
I can't say what they're going to do, but I think there are intelligent people in charge of both countries, and they must know the consequences of going forward in the way they have been. They must know that if they go on at this rate, the glaciers in the Himalayas will melt away, and that has consequences for all the big rivers, Yangtze, Brahmaputra, and the Ganges. And that means millions of people living off agriculture along those river basins will be hurt. But that's again beyond our control. We just watch it. We cannot solve the world's problems.
Is there another question from the floor? I see some hands at the back. Please go ahead.
Good evening, sir. Enkiat from Lubricants. I have two questions for you.
Ask one first.
All right, I'll ask
one
first.
One at a time.
Okay, for the first question, in the area of providing energy, I think Singapore's strength is in where we are situated and we are efficient. So given that emerging economies are rising up, their energy demand is growing, and some like Brazil and China even have their own oil field. So naturally, in the long run, perhaps energy company will start to shift more of their operations to get closer to the customers and to maybe tap into the reserves. How then can Singapore still stay relevant, given that one day their efficiency may even be on par with us? Thanks.
Supply and demand settles most problems. Market forces respond to supply and demand. If you have the money, you can pay for what you demand, you will get it. If you haven't got the money, you may have all the oil next door, you won't get any. That's life. So the key is get our economy growing. How? Financial center, logistics center, transportation hub, all the services that we provide, plus manufacturing, and that will pay for what we need. And if we can pay for what we need, we'll get what we need. The biggest equalizer is currency at official exchange rates and at PPP to decide your standard of living. PPP meaning purchasing power parity.
Do you want to ask your second question?
Okay. Second question is closer to us. So in JB, I think they are in that Iskandar project or the Iskandar region. They are going to have a petrochemical hub. Do you think that will complement what we have in Singapore, or they will pose to be a serious threat for us?
We cannot prevent them from having a petrochemical hub. They can see how useful our petrochemical hub has been. They have oil and they want to place their hub next to us so that ships will call by on their hub first before they call by on us. The answer is, which is the more efficient hub? Where do ships turn around faster? Have you got my answer?
Singapore's.
Let me take up a question that arose in Mr. Vose's speech earlier in reference to your memoirs. You talked about how you searched around and you spoke to MNC leaders and discovered that some of Shell's practices in assessing its managers and talent was one of the best in the world, and you tried to apply it to the Singapore civil service. And there were other aspects as well, like the scenario planning that we do in Shell. Could you give us a sense of how you came to some of those conclusions and how it played out when you applied it to the civil service? And was there any learnings that companies like Shell might take away from the experience applying it in Singapore?
I was intrigued at the ability of Shell to have its talent pool spread over 100 countries and yet pick the right people for promotions. So I spent time discussing it with Shell managers and directors who came around. And I found that they had a panel that regularly went around and rated them. In other words, the same panel visits umpteen different places and rates each person in the early days by what they call the hair qualities, helicopter quality, analysis. I've forgotten the four anyway, but there are four of them called HIR. And I decided that made more sense than the 30, 40 ticks that I get to put on a report card of officers working under me, which the British left behind. It makes no sense. I mean, it's got so many details, you can't sum it up. And this was a system where you can sum up what are the essentials in a human being that gives you his current estimated potential, which is another concept which I think was useful. You can judge from the hair qualities what the person's current estimated potential was. It doesn't mean it stays put there all the time. With time he grows, he matures, he may go up, he may go down. But it gives a fair indication on what kind of person he'll be as you look ahead.
See your hand over there.
Mr. Lee, my name is Lan Hui Hong from Shell. I hope my next question is not too intrusive. I'm just curious. Could you give us your perspective on what is the meaning of life?
Life is what you make of it. You're dealt a pack of cards. Your DNA is fixed by your mother and your father. And you may be siblings, but you may get different parcels of the DNA. Your job is to make the best of the cards that have been handed out to you. What can you do well? What can you not do well? What are you worse at? Now, if you ask me to make my living as an artist, I'll starve. Because I just can't draw. It wasn't in my father or my mother or my great-grandfathers and grandmothers. But if you ask me, do a mathematical question, or to argue a point out, I'll get by. That's the cards I was handed out, and I make use of them. Don't try and do something you were not favored by nature to do.